Imagine for a second that you're not you, but a noblewoman at the Tudor court. And King Henry VIII has just decided you are his next wife. In this video, we'll talk about whether you could have dodged the royal proposal, what your wedding and first night might have looked like, what life as queen would involve, and, of course, whether you'd keep your head at the end of it all. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Female Tales. I'm Yulia, and together on this channel, we explore the stories of remarkable women from history. If history speaks to you, like the video, join our community, and let's head straight into the depths of the past. From Henry's marital history, we know that two of his wives were of royal blood, Catherine of Aragon and Anne of Cleves. But the other four, they were English noblewomen, which means that, technically, any noble girl who happened to catch the king's eye and spark his interest had a very real chance of becoming Queen of England. And while modern women, like us, might find that thought a little unsettling, back in the 16th century, being related to the king was the ultimate social elevator. Noble families were desperate to get their daughters, nieces, and cousins anywhere near the royal court, just for the slim chance they might be noticed. But first, let's figure out whether you would have even been at risk, and, more importantly, if you'd be Henry's type. To do that, we need to compare you to the Tudor beauty standards. In the 16th century, the ultimate sign of female beauty was skin. More specifically, fair, pale skin. It meant you didn't have to work under the sun like a peasant, and just as important, it suggested you were in good health and capable of producing heirs. And as for makeup, during Henry's reign, that wasn't really in fashion. Natural beauty was preferred. The real obsession with makeup would come later, during the reign of Elizabeth I, and it's possible that it was exactly that which became the cause of her death. The most fashionable hair colours were all shades of blonde and red. Most of the time, women kept their hair hidden under the traditional English hood. But when Anne Boleyn made the French hood popular, hair colour suddenly started to matter again. You'd also definitely catch Henry's eye if you had blue or green eyes and rosy cheeks and lips, that classic English rose look. Ideally, you'd look a bit like Elizabeth of York, Henry's mother, because to him, she remained the ultimate standard of beauty. Most of his wives, and his mistresses too, let's not forget them, fit that general mould. The one exception was Anne Boleyn. She had dark hair, dark eyes, and a more olive-toned complexion. She didn't match the ideal of a perfect English beauty, but her charisma, intelligence, and style completely captivated the king. So now, take a good long look in the mirror, and to be perfectly honest, it's probably better not to be Henry's type, because your chances of keeping your head just went way up. But let's say you have caught the king's eye, and now he's offering you his hand and heart. Did you even have a chance to turn down such questionable gift of fate? Refusing the king was almost impossible. Royal marriages weren't romantic offers, they were more like royal commands, especially when it came to someone as forceful as Henry VIII. Becoming the king's chosen one was seen as both an honour and a dangerous duty for your entire family. Saying no could lead to royal displeasure, or even accusations of treason. As an English noblewoman, you couldn't just freely reject Henry's advances. Doing so could put your whole lineage at risk. Take Catherine Parr, for example. She was a young widow in love with another man, Sir Thomas Seymour. But when Henry decided he wanted her for his sixth wife, Catherine really didn't have a choice. The king found out about Seymour and promptly sent him abroad, claiming Catherine for himself. Only foreign princesses had some room to escape Henry's grasp, and even then it required careful diplomacy. When the aging king set his sights on Christina of Denmark, she famously replied that she'd marry him. If I had two heads, one should be at the King of England's disposal. Naturally, she could afford to be that bold. She was far beyond Henry's reach. But for a lady at the English court, that kind of defiance was unthinkable. So, you're officially engaged to Henry VIII. And you might be thinking, well, maybe he'll have me executed later, but at least I'll get a fabulous royal wedding first, right? Sorry to disappoint you, but don't expect a grand celebration, a white dress, or cheering crowds of loyal subjects. Henry's real weddings were surprisingly quiet and low-key. He didn't throw public celebrations when he got married. Take his first wedding to Catherine of Aragon, for example. On June 11th, 1509, 17-year-old Henry married her in the Queen's private chapel at Greenwich Palace, with only the Archbishop of Canterbury and a handful of witnesses present. Quite a contrast to Catherine's first wedding, to Henry's older brother Arthur, which had taken place at St Paul's Cathedral in London, and was followed by nearly 2 weeks of public festivities. At least Catherine and Henry later had a grand joint coronation, so considering this was her second royal marriage, the quiet ceremony was seen as acceptable. Anne Boleyn, on the other hand, had not one but 2 weddings with Henry, and both were incredibly private. The first, a secret ceremony, likely happened in October or November of 1532, and Anne was already pregnant with Elizabeth not long after. The second, official wedding, took place on January 25th, 1533, in Henry's private chapel at Whitehall Palace. Witnesses were told to keep silent about the whole thing until Easter, when the marriage and Anne's pregnancy were finally announced to the public. Technically, this was bigamy, since Henry's marriage to Catherine wasn't annulled until May 1533. Awkward Henry. Very awkward. Anne did get her own lavish coronation, but she was the last wife Henry crowned. For the rest, he decided to wait until a male heir was born. As we know, that didn't go so well. Jane Seymour died too soon and the others never produced a son. But, okay, maybe Jane didn't get a coronation. Surely she at least had a big, joyful wedding. Nope. Her wedding happened just 11 days after Anne Boleyn's execution. It was extremely private, held in the Queen's closet at Whitehall Palace. Archbishop Cranmer performed the ceremony, and after that, Jane simply sat under a canopy in the Great Hall. All of London was scandalised by how quickly it all happened. Even Anne's enemies were shocked. As for Anne of Cleves, Henry didn't even want to marry her. He showed up to the chapel at Greenwich grumbling, "Is there none other remedy but that I must needs, against my will, put my neck in the yoke?" So this marriage wasn't off to a great start, right from the ceremony. The wedding to wife number 5, Catherine Howard, took place on the same day his former friend and advisor, Thomas Cromwell, was executed, July 28, 1540. The ceremony was kept secret for 10 more days, and again it was incredibly small and private. Maybe the terrible ending of this marriage had something to do with how terribly it began? Finally, Henry's last marriage, to Catherine Parr, took place on July 12, 1543, once again in a private ceremony in the Queen's Chapel at Hampton Court. By that point, Henry weighed over 300 pounds and could barely walk. A big celebration just wasn't in the cards. In short, none of Henry's weddings featured grand parades, thousands of guests, or joyful public celebrations. So even as Henry's wife, you're not getting the dream wedding. Sorry. But there's one thing you definitely won't be able to avoid as the wife of a monarch: the wedding night. So, what was Tudor sex actually like? Let's start with the good news: no public consummation. Yes, in Tudor England, there was a special ceremony where relatives and courtiers would walk the newlyweds to the bedroom, bless the bed, and wish them well. But no one actually stood there to watch, unlike in France. So, small mercies. The height of sex appeal: a thin linen nightshirt and loose hair. That's how queens were expected to greet Henry as he made his dramatic walk down the corridor to their bedchamber. Now, Tudor sex itself was an interesting concept. Naturally, the main goal was to produce an heir. But there was a strong belief that a woman had to enjoy sex in order to conceive a healthy child. That said, both the church and physicians had some, let's call them opinions about how it should be done. Only certain positions were considered acceptable. Missionary was recommended, while anything more creative was discouraged, as it was said to stir up lust. And there were some oddly charming fertility traditions too. For example, it was believed that if a man tied a ribbon around his left testicle, he was more likely to father a boy. Makes you wonder, did Henry ever try that? So, let's say your wedding night went well. Now what? What came next for the wives of Henry VIII when it came to pregnancy and childbirth? As you probably remember, Henry VIII was obsessed with producing a male heir. Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn were brutally cast aside for failing to give him the son he so desperately wanted. Even though, as modern genetic studies suggest, the problem was most likely with Henry, not them. Now, If you were pregnant in Tudor times, you'd have to follow a very specific tradition known as taking to her chamber. This meant that about 1 or 2 months before your due date, you'd withdraw completely from public life and move into a set of secluded rooms, far from any men, including the king himself. Sex during pregnancy in Tudor times was considered harmful to the baby. Once inside, the doors were literally closed. Shutters were drawn, windows covered with heavy tapestries, a fire was kept burning for warmth, and the lighting was kept dim, no matter what the weather was like outside. The idea was to create a quiet, dark, calming atmosphere, to protect both the mother and child from outside harm. Only women were allowed inside, your ladies-in-waiting, midwives and nurses. At the time, childbirth was considered entirely a woman's domain. No male doctors, no male attendants. The Queen's rooms were often decorated with religious icons and holy relics for spiritual comfort. Many women would keep items like the girdle of the Virgin Mary, a sacred bell believed to ease the pain of labour. And labour was no small thing. It was dangerous, frightening, and often tragic. Infant and maternal mortality rates were high, even for queens. Henry's wives suffered many heartbreaking losses. Catherine of Aragon endured multiple stillbirths. Anne Boleyn miscarried a son, and Jane Seymour died painfully just 2 weeks after giving birth to the long-awaited heir. After childbirth, a Tudor queen remained in seclusion for weeks to recover, until she underwent a religious ritual called churching. This was performed about 40 days after the birth, and it served to formally reintroduce the mother to society, giving thanks for a safe delivery. Only after this ceremony could you finally leave your confinement and return to public royal duties. Oh yes, if you thought queens just dressed up, danced at balls, and gave birth from time to time, think again. Every one of Henry's wives had real responsibilities. First of all eyes at court were constantly on the Queen, and people expected her to be a shining example of virtue. Each queen built her own household and set strict moral standards. For instance, after Anne Boleyn's execution, Jane Seymour quickly brought back traditional English fashion and distanced herself from courtly entertainments, all to highlight her contrast with her predecessor. Women were expected to spend their time sewing, reading religious texts, and caring for children. A queen was supposed to attend mass, support charitable causes, and receive ambassadors. Of course, there was still room for enjoyment: music, dancing, feasts. I actually talked about this in my video about One Day with Anne Boleyn, so if you want a full hour-by-hour breakdown, check that one out. Now and then, a queen could even get real political power, taking on the role of consort in the truest sense. Catherine of Aragon and Catherine Parr, for example, were both entrusted with authority while Henry was away fighting in France. But that was the exception, not the rule, and really just proves how politically skilled and intelligent those two women were. In reality, life at court for a queen was more like walking a tightrope. On one side, you had a husband who was emotionally unstable and prone to sudden fits of rage. On the other, a nest of rival court factions just waiting for you to slip and fall from your pedestal. In fact, the downfalls of Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and even the plot against Catherine Parr were all driven by political rivalries at court. To survive, you had to be extremely clever and very careful. Don't make enemies, like Anne Boleyn did when she crossed Thomas Cromwell. Keep your youthful indiscretions very well hidden, unlike poor Catherine Howard. Avoid theological debates that could get you accused of heresy, like what nearly happened to Catherine Parr. And if the king wants a divorce? Take a page out of Anne of Cleves' book and agree quickly and politely, because that might just make you one of the richest and most free women in all of England. So ladies, would you want to be Queen of England and try to fix Henry VIII? Or are you, like me, feeling pretty good about living in a time where getting dumped doesn't mean losing your head? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.